Welcome to Ask Earl Anything. This is the show where your questions make the show. Without your questions, I don't have a show. This is February 2024, and this is the 6th anniversary of Ask Earl Anything. And in doing some prep for this show, I was waiting for it to render down and move over to my computer, and all of a sudden I thought, let me find some old Ask Earl Anything footage and play some classic Ask Earl Anything. So on this show today, in celebration of 6 years of Ask Earl Anything, I'm going to bring you back to my first show. And I'm going to drop in the first Ask Earl Anything question for you to see. And it's about my studio and me. And it's the one that got this whole show started. So I hope you enjoy Classic Ask Earl Anything. And if this feature works, let me know, because I have plenty of other little clips from some of my favorite Ask Earl Anything shows over the last 6 years I'd love to share. And a lot of times I get asked the same question over and over again, and it's interesting to see how I answered something the first time. So I hope you enjoy this. And stay tuned for the rest of the show, because I got a whole bunch of questions on today's show. Welcome to Drum Talk, and today I'm going to do something a little different. I'm going to actually take a question. This is going to be a new series we're going to start, Ask Earl Anything. So the first question comes from JBone23, and he said, Earl, I'm wondering if you might consider a video on your background and how you learned all of this. And this is in reference to the video I did about my recording studio and the DAW. And I showed Logic, and I showed the plugins and all that good stuff. And at the end of that video, I guess he thought, well, how did you get into all this stuff? Now, I do have a video on my background. My wife interviewed me. And of course, my wife picked out very unique things about myself, but I never really got into how I got into the recording thing and all that stuff. So let's talk a little bit about my background and how I got into recording, and we'll go from there. But if you want to reference my video interview from my wife, Stephanie Bennett, interviewing Earldrum, check that out. I'll leave a link in the cards or at the end of the video. But let's talk about how I got my recording career and started. It goes way back to college. When I was in college, I got this recording bug. Actually, probably even goes back before then, to be honest, my first band. And when I started looking at all the people that played on records and stuff, and that's when I started noticing guys' names like Hal Blaine and Danny Serafin, and then eventually Jeff Porcaro, and any record I looked at who played on the record. It was kind of a thing. And then in my college years, it was the jazz musicians, and then the rock albums, it would be the rock guys. But a lot of singer-songwriter types always had studio musicians on it. So I started noticing studio musicians, and I would say Steely Dan was a big place, a starting point for that. Because when I looked at the back of the Age album, there was a different drummer on almost every track. And all my favorites, Bernard, Steve Gadd, Rick Marotta, the list goes on. I mean, it was just incredible, the people that played on the Age album. But I don't want to talk about Asia. How did I get into recording? Well, I had a desire to be a studio musician, so I figured the only way to become a studio musician is to play in studios. So I did some local sessions at some local studios, but the bug really hit me after I went to Nashville with a band called Saved by Grace. And when I went to Nashville, there's a video on John Hammond, if you want to get that story. But he actually replaced me on that Nashville session after I did 6 of the 10 tracks on the album. But that's where it really hit. And it was at that point in time I realized that I really want to do this. So how am I going to get more demo sessions to play in the studio? Because really, you only get comfortable playing in the studio if you have demo sessions. Next thing I know, we're out of the 80s and we're into the 90s, and the ADAT world started. And I'm thinking, we're going to build a home studio. And in 1995, I moved from Asbury Park, New Jersey to Brick, New Jersey. And I had a 2-car garage, a really extended 2-car garage, and I built my first studio. It took 5-6 years for it to actually actualize itself. But by the end of the time we lived there, I bought equipment. I bought one ADAT and a board and a few microphones, and I started recording. And it was pretty bad. Actually, it was very bad, actually. But the reason why I bought a recording studio is because my wife's a singer, and I wanted to do her album. I also wanted to help out with the church I was at the time, but that never materialized. But I did start her album. And I started her album in a lot of different places. I started at a friend's studio, my friend Tony Serlin, who's a bass player. We recorded a bunch of demos there. Most of those are lost and gone because they never got final mixes on them and stuff. And he changed formats in the middle of our project. And then I got ADATs. And my friend Alex Doty, another bass player, we produced an album of South Jersey Christian musicians. And my wife had two songs on that album. And I played on probably 3 or 4 cuts off the album. And it was like a compilation album. And I helped produce. I got into doing some producing work, where it wasn't just playing drums, but I was trying to help produce the albums and stuff. And all of a sudden it's 2000 and I'm moving to Florida. And I've got an 8-track ADAT studio. And we moved to Florida, and I move into a house in Coral Springs, Florida, and I buy a house where I don't have a room for a recording studio, and it ends up being in a bedroom. And I don't know anybody musically down here in South Florida, so how am I going to do this album of my wife's stuff when I don't have any musicians to play it? Well, slowly but surely, as I put it, God brought the people. I ended up playing in some churches locally. I met some great musicians, and over the next 4 years of living in Coral Springs, I would record my wife's album in a bedroom studio. The studio is nothing but 11 by 11 in size. And I recorded live drums in the studio. Actually, only 2 of the tracks on the album were not recorded in the studio drum-wise. I think it was 2. Maybe, 2. Anyhow. But the majority of the tracking was done in this studio environment in my house. And I used to have to usher everybody out. And my wife was working on her PhD at the time. And my kids were teenagers. And this was kind of like my outlet. So I started recording her album. And I recorded it on the first DAW I had, which was Digital Performer 3.1. I actually got rid of the ADATs. I still have one today, but it's not really working. I have it in my rack as a memento of the time. And I started working in Digital Performer 3.11 on a Mac G4 computer, and I recorded my wife's album. And I ended up mixing it at a friend's studio, my friend Steve Cruz, who had Crucified Studios, and he had a great mixing console. He had a Yamaha digital board and a lot of outboard gear, and we actually mixed my wife's album. And in 2005, my wife's album came out, and that was also the year I changed companies, and my wife got a job teaching at Palm Beach Atlantic University, and the rest was history. We moved to Lake Worth, and that's where I built my current studio in this room that I'm in now. And from 2006 to now, I've worked on a bunch of different album projects and demo sessions for all kinds of musicians. In 2007, my son was in college, or 2008, and he bought Logic version 8, and that's when I got into Logic. I kept growing with Logic and Digital Performer until Digital Performer hit version 7, and then I pretty much became a Logic guy, and it went to Logic 9 and now Logic Pro X10. And that's where I got my recording studio from, and I did some album projects here. I recorded a couple bluegrass albums. I actually recorded 3 bluegrass albums in my career. A contemporary Christian album, here in the studio. My wife's inspirational worship meditative album. I just did an album for a Haitian singer named Jean Alexander, and Jean's album I did here at my studio. I've done some mixing projects and some mastering projects here in the studio too over the last, I'd say since 2006, I've worked on probably 8 or 9 major projects, me playing or whatever. I've recorded tracks for people in New Jersey and in Dubai. And I did this to get into it. Now, realize this, I was 40 years old when this studio thing took off. I actually got my first studio really together at 39. And that was the big question J-Bone was asking. How do you do this? I'm a little over 40. How do you do this? Well, you do it with a little bit of inspiration, a lot of drive, and a lot of reading. At that time, I read a lot of magazines. Magazines like Tape Op and Sound on Sound magazine, Recording magazine, Mix magazine, Electronic Musician. Today, you've got YouTube. You got places like Pensado's Place or RecordingRevolution.com. There's or music. I forget the guy that's the Logic expert. His name is the Music Help Tech guy, I guess, or something. He's got all these videos on Logic. There's so many places to go get information about how to do this stuff today. So when I learned how to mic drums, I basically was looking at where I saw things done put in other studios I worked in. And that's how it happened. I've been blessed to have recorded in Nashville, in New York City. In New York City, I recorded this great studio called The Magic Shop, which is no longer in business. Had a wraparound Neve console, and I got to do some tracking there. I did a lot of demo stuff for anybody in New Jersey and Florida. I still do a lot of demo stuff for people and love working with people. So it really takes that drive. Anyhow, I hope I answered your question, J-Bone, and thanks for watching. And I really do appreciate you guys. And anyhow, hope you have a great day. And if you have a question, send me the question, and maybe you'll be the next one on Ask Earl Anything. Thanks. Let's talk about where we're at this month. Now, last month was a tough month. And I'll tell you why it was a tough month. I had a slow month. I couldn't really get started on any weekend where I was just knocking out covers. I usually like to have a whole bunch of covers banked when I'm going into February, which is Black History Month. And I love to do soul, R&B, and gospel music during the month of February. And I will continue to do that this month. And I've done a few covers already. So that's my goal for this month, is to do as many soul, R&B, gospel flavored classics as I possibly could find and put into this month. Now, with that being said, I usually have a bunch banked, and I don't have as many banked as I'd like. So there may be a couple drop days this month. January turned into a month of, I don't know, life and living life. Spending time with family. The end of the month, last weekend, I was sick as a dog. Totally lost the weekend last weekend. I normally do Ask Earl Anything the weekend before the month. This is now the 3rd of February, so I'm behind on that. So a lot going on there. Lot going on at work. A lot going on in life. And when you get sick, it really knocks you out. And I was really knocked out. I still am not back to 100% yet from whatever hit me. Seemed like a flu, high fever, and all that kind of stuff. And the funny thing is, all the other things that come out with more normal flus, the cold, sniffles, all that stuff has been very, very slow coming out of me. Very slow. Not a lot just pouring out. So it's been a strange week. Anyhow, with that said, I have a show this week. I have a bunch of questions. Not a lot else to talk about other than wanting to stay healthy and get healthy and be healthy. And continue to smile and live life and enjoy life. I'm actually playing drums this weekend at church. So I got that too going on this weekend. So there'll be less output this weekend because of that. So there's a lot going on. And all that to say is thank you all for watching my channel and watching me do what I do every week. Now, I tried a few things in the month of January, one being the little short drum patterns from the Funk Drumming Workbook. I realized after releasing one or two of them that I really wasn't digging the way they came out. Had some suggestions. A friend of mine named Tim, I forget what he goes by technically, Tim Bragg is his name. He said, why don't you do fills after you do the groove, play the groove and then play some fills. That probably would make it a little bit more fun to do if I ever go back and do some more grooves. I even got one of the grooves wrong. Nothing new there either. My reading skills are not what they used to be anyhow. I was interpreting one a little bit wrong. That was number 30. So with that being said, I found the whole pattern thing to be a little bit not really where I'm at yet to do. I'm not sure what to do with it, so we'll see what happens as life goes on. I also had another failed project for the time being. It's not completely failed, but I bought a sprocket for a DW pedal to put on my Camco pedal, my vintage Camco pedal. I wanted to sprocket it up with a bicycle chain sprocket. I have a strap on it. And that was a massive fail so far. I haven't figured out how to break it free. Jim Flies 2 told me how to do it. I just got to do it one day. I lost heart in it after that first weekend. I was going to film and do it and actually show you how you do this thing. So that could come this month too if I get the gumption back to kind of sit there and play with the sprocket I bought and put it on that pedal. Anyhow, I'm talking about all the not positive stuff, I'm talking about all the fails, but that's kind of funny, starting with the fails. All right, let's talk about Ask Earl Anything. I got a whole bunch of questions, so let's deal with it. All right, first question comes from Fred Kellogg, 1178. He said, what batterhead do you use on your bass drum for a deep sound? Maybe you can answer me next time. I think I'm late. Thank you. Happy New Year. So Fred wants to know what bass drum head I use. I will tell you something I've been messing with my tuning the last month. I don't know if any of you realize it or not, but I was reading an article, and I believe the article was about Ed Green, session drummer Ed Green, and a modern drummer. It was in the, I think it was the one with the Doobie Brothers, October, November 1980. And I pulled that out, and I was reading it, and he said something about tuning his bass drum batter head tighter to get the sound he got for a lot of those R&B classics. So I have tried to now take my bass drum, which I've usually kept just finger tight, head-wise, and I tightened it up a little bit. So my bass drum's got a little bit more boinginess to it, but it doesn't seem to be hurting the sound of it on tracks. So I've tuned up my bass drum heads tighter. I don't know if you guys like it or not, but I don't know if you've even noticed it, but it was something that I decisionally tried to do. Now, my favorite bass drum head is an EMAD head. I have a UV1 EMAD on my 20-inch bass drum, which is now in the other studio, Studio B. I moved the concert ton kit with the 22-inch bass drum into Studio A. This has got an EQ4 batter on it, Evans EQ4. But I've used everything from black dot heads, pinstripe heads, power stroke heads. I don't know. I've tried just about every bass drum head there is. Coated ambassadors. Coated ambassadors actually sound very good. I think my favorite head on the 22 was the black dot head, believe it or not. I may need to get another one of those one of these days to really get that punchy sound again out of it. But I changed it to the EQ4 a while ago. Head is part of it. What you put in it's another part of it. How you tune it's another part of it. So it's more than just the head. It's a combination of tuning, muffling, how you mic it. All those things, Fred, contribute to the sound of a bass drum. But I think my bass drums sound pretty deep. even though this is tuned up a little bit. And so is the 20. I got them both cranked a little bit. So nobody's really called me out that the bass drum sounds changed all that much. But I hear it. I hear it when I listen to my recordings. So anyhow, I hope that helps, Fred. That's where I'm at with that. Those are the current heads, too. All right, my next one comes from Ken Friedman, 3317. He said, "Hey Earl, I know zero about drumming other than listening and really enjoying it. Was wondering, do you rehearse these videos, these songs, before you video? If somehow not, would you play each song the same each time?" That's a great question, Ken. The answer to your question is I don't necessarily, let's put it this way. I rehearse with the camera on. I've told this to many people. So usually when I'm going to do a song, I turn all the cameras on and I set up my noises and I bring it in the DAW and I set up all the mics and I alarm all the mic tracks and I start recording from square one as I'm practicing. Does the song patterns change? Does the song get more dialed in the more you do it? Yes, it does. Because I'm learning the song, literally learning the song while I'm practicing it and playing it. Sometimes I get a song in 10 minutes. Sometimes I get a song in an hour. It really depends on the song. It depends on what I'm trying to do with the song, how close to the original I want to get. Sometimes I can't get exact. Rarely do I get exact, but I can't even get close to the original. Everything about it isn't as close as I want it to be. I try to go closer and closer to the original drummer stuff, but there always ends up being a little bit of me. And the more I learn the song, the more of me shows up. So as I learn the song, the more comfortable I become with the song, the more of my playing shows up in the playing. So, and I actually am learning about the drummer and what the drummer did on a song by listening to it over and over again, trying to get the parts pretty close to right. So that's how I learn songs, and that's how I practice songs. I don't practice and then record. I practice with the video on. So if I get it done quicker, I get it done quicker. If it takes longer, it takes a little longer, but it rarely takes longer. It usually takes within an hour, I get it done. And a lot of times it's way less than an hour. So I get to a point where I can't do it anymore too. That's what happened today. I was doing an Andre Crouch song today, and I did it like, I don't know, 10, 15 times, I guess. And it got to the point where there was no more in me. That was it. One of those is going to have to work. So I've got 2 takes that are a possibility, and we'll see what happens. So that's the way I do it, Ken. Kind of play it. Then I go, that's it. Let's review. Let's look at it. If it sounds right, we release it. And that's the end of the song. So that's how I learn music. Thanks for the question. Appreciate it. Next one comes from Adam, AR drummer. He said, "Do you play any other instruments other than drums?" I'd love to tell you I play other instruments other than drums, but I really don't. I play percussion, of course. I play congas and all the toys and all that stuff. In college, I used to play marimba and vibraphone and timpani, but I don't consider myself a timpanist or a mallet player. I could sit at a keyboard and kind of peck out some notes and melodies and chords, but I don't consider myself a piano player. I never learned how to play guitar, even though I had a guitar methods class in college that I snowed myself into an A somehow. That's a story for another day, how I got through guitar methods in college, because I should not have gotten an A in that class, but teacher liked me. What can I tell you? He thought I knew how to play. That was the funny part about it. The teacher actually thought I knew how to play guitar, but I didn't. I didn't have a clue how to play guitar. So I miss my son because my son was a great guitar player. So Nope, don't play any other instruments. The only instrument I'd like to play is bass, and I have a bass, and I think about it once in a while, and I pick it up and kind of move my fingers on it, but I don't really have it, you know? And I think learning a melodic instrument's really important for a drummer, and I wish I'd taken that advice in college. I really do. I struggled to get through school, period. Forget about playing another instrument. Just getting through playing drums was a struggle for me in college. Truthfully, if I was to think about it, I probably shouldn't have went to music school. I should have just played gigs. But my mom wanted me to go to college, and I went to college, and somehow I got a music degree and got out of college. Never used the music degree for anything other than to get me a job in safety and training one day with a college education saying, hey, I've got a BA in something, hire me for this job. And, and that's how I got into training and safety, was because I had a degree. So getting a degree is very important, but getting a degree in the field you're going to be doing all your work in, that's a different ballgame. That didn't work for me. I had a good liberal arts degree, and it got me a job one day. So anyhow, I don't know if you can get away with that today, but that's how it worked back in the late 80s when I got my foot in the door for safety and training. So anyhow, thanks for the question, Adam. Great question, too. All right, my next question comes from Vince. Vince in rendition. It's Vince Gomez, my friend Vince. He said, speaking of toms, this was on Let It Ride, Bachman Turner Overdrive. If gigging with a 12 and a 14, do you prefer to mount the 14 for floor tom? Thanks for all you do. To be honest, I don't really like mounting a floor tom, even though on this kit, this is a mounted 15 today. I will tell you my Gretsch bass drum, my Gretsch kit, my walnut Gretsch kit over there. At one point, I wanted a mounted floor tom like Steve Gadd, and I didn't have rims mounts at the time, and I decided to drill holes and put in a tom mount on that 14 by 14 floor tom. To this day, I regret. So much for that. But no one's getting that kit, so I'm not selling it to anybody. So don't really care about the value of it. It's mine. So mine is mine. And I do have a rims mount for it, too. It's on this 14 by 14 floor, this 10 by 14 tom, I think. No, actually, it's an 8-lug rims mount. So I actually have an 8-lugs rims mount for that floor tom that I can mount on a stand if I want to. But I tend to not like to do that anymore. Those days are kind of gone, except for with the concert tom kit. Concert tom kit's designed to have drums hanging off everything. That's what it's designed for. But I like a floor tom. I like having a floor tom. I like a 14 by 14 floor tom. I like a 16 by 16 floor tom. I like the way they sound. And I don't need them mounted. But I have mounted my floor toms before. Both of them. Actually, they both had rims mounts at one point. So I've done everything you could possibly do with drum kits. I really, really, really wanted the Steve Gadd thing at one point in time. And then once I got the 8 by 10, the 8 by 12, the 14 by 14, 16 by 16 on mounted up, then I did it and it was over with. And then I let go of it, put it away, I had a drum rack at one time, I had a Jeff Porcaro drum rack, a Pearl Porcaro rack. I wish I hadn't gotten rid of that. I gave it to my friend Scott, who didn't use it ever. So I should not have given him that rack. Because that rack would be really cool in here with all these toms or even that other kit, to have that Jeff thing. It looked just like Jeff's kit at one point in time. I had the toms hanging off the rack and the square rack and everything. I love that rack. But again, just like a lot of things in my life, it came and went. Nice knowing you, nice having you. So, sayonara. No use crying over spilt milk. So, yeah, I would go with 12 mounted tom on the bass drum and a floor tom. That's my thing. It's easier to take to a gig, too, to be honest. So, all right, my next one comes from Hot Rod Tiki 200. His name is Jason. He said, if you're just playing and not necessarily to a song, How do you like your toms to sound? Example, a lot brighter tone and ring, or a 70s thud style? That's an interesting question. I'm more of the thud guy. I like the 70s vibe. But every once in a while, like if I'm playing a good jazz song, I want to tune that 12-inch tom up high and get that high tom jazz tuning thing. But I like that thud. That's kind of my tuning. The single heads make that happen too. So I will say the single-headed toms give you that thud. And when I tune up my Gretsch toms, they tend to have that thuddy gad tuning too. So it's kind of my thing. I've always gone for that 70s thud. That's more my sound than any kind of overly tuned up toms. So I can get the other sound, and I do. And I think I just did a cover today that I released where the tom sounded really nice and wide open and a little bit tuned a little higher than normal. It was a stylistics tune. Forget the name of it. I did it yesterday, and I did it on that kit in there, and it just sounded nice. There's a way you tune that kit, and then there's a way you EQ it in Logic to make it sound the way it sounds. But it sounded really wide open and pretty. So I like that sound too. But to be honest, I go more for the thud than for the high-pitched sound. Anyhow, I hope that helps. Thanks, Jason, for the question. Next question comes from Jack Niles, another friend, follower of the channel. He said, hey, Earl, this was on Got to Get You Into My Life. He said, are those original snare wires on the Acrolite snare drum? Sounds great. All right, a couple months back, I did something on my Acrolite. I actually even tried using the Steve Gadd 10 wire strand option on this drum. And then I have a 30 strand wire. I'm back to the 30 strand on this drum, just to let you know. And what I'm using is not stock. This is called Metrics. I think they're made by Pure Sound, and they're the black ones. And it's the 30 strand wires, and they sound great. I've been using them on this drum for quite some time, and I have no complaints about it. Now this is a 1980s Acrolite, early 80s, with the painted aluminum, and it's got the tone control in it. So, and this one's got a P85, not original. I took the original P85 off; it was broken, so I put a different P85 on. This I think came from my Black Beauty, to be honest. But and if you'll notice also triple flange on the bottom, but a die cast on the top. So I've got this drum all souped up right now. Nobody really spends that kind of money on an Acrolite, you know. But yeah, Metrics snare wires. Now, there's a whole bunch of snare wires I like. I'm a big fan of the Canopus. I've got them on my 6.5 by 14 Black Beauty. I like the Noble Cooley wires on the Noble Cooley drum. When I got my Noble Cooley refinished in 2020, right at the beginning of COVID, I sent my drum away to Noble Cooley, and they refinished the drum. They put brand new color on it, number one, and then they cleaned up everything. And the only thing that didn't get replaced, I think, on the whole thing was the hoops, which were original 1994 Noble Cooley die-cast hoops, but they don't even make those anymore. So that drum's got the original hoops on it, but they took every stinking casting off, and the butt plate and the strainer off, and they rebuilt the whole drum. And it's a beauty, and it sounds great, and it's vintage because that shell is got to be, it's 1994, so we're talking 20 years, no, 30 years now, 94, 2000, no, 2014. Yeah, it's 30 years old now. Holy crud, man! Where does time go, man? It just. Whew, 30 years old that Noble Coolie is, even though it looks brand new because I had it refinished. So, but I like those snare wires. They've got like kind of like a little gap between the wire. That sounds great on that drum. And I've got the 42 strand wires on my Black Beauty. I like the Pure Sound wires. So I use a lot of different snare wires, but this is Metrics. I bought these a while ago and they work great. Great sounding snare wires. So thanks for the question again, Jack. All right, next question. This one comes from Dougie G6423 on Take Me Closer, Phil Keggy. And it was on this kit in the other room a few years ago. And I had a blanket over the bass drum, and he asked the question, why is your bass drum covered? You sound good, by the way. That's what he said. Thanks, Dougie, for that comment. You know, one of the tricks in the studio to keep bleed out of the bass drum mic is to put a packing blanket over top of your bass drum. They've been doing that forever. That's an old studio trick. They use the same packing blanket concept over a piano, basically to keep the bleed from getting into a piano if everybody's tracking live with an acoustic piano. So it's just a technique to get rid of bleed into the drum through the front head hole. Now, this bass drum's got a huge front hole. Matter of fact, it's almost a whole head hole size. This is really almost like a drum without a bass drum head on the front. The other one's got a small hole in the center. I tend to like holes in the center of the drum versus off to the side. I've done my study on this, by the way. I think it sounds better when you put the mic dead center of the drum, and then even if you put it in, you twist it to the side a little bit, but it's off the center axis versus coming off the side. And I think for this 22, the big hole is fine. Works great. Hal Blaine used it for years that way. A lot of guys have. So I've just gone to a traditional 70s bass drum sound on this drum, and it sounds good, and I like it, and I'm not messing with it. So I have no desire to put a head with a hole off to the side small and get resonation and get all that woof to it. You know, it's got less woof. This is more of a punchy 70s bass drum. And that's what I was going for on Take Me Closer. And I covered over the top head. Matter of fact, you want to know the real reason why I had a blanket there? My son-in-law took the top. My son-in-law was doing a session in my studio, and he pulled the bass drum mic out of the bass drum. Him or one of his friends did this, and when that happened, it caught the head and ripped it, and the head had a huge rip in it. So there was a period of time where I had the front head completely off, and it was just no head on the front. Of course, I wasn't putting anything on the bass drum to kind of weigh it down. You don't want to have a front head off the bass drum with no hoop or nothing there if you've got something attached to the middle, because then it's going to make the shell go out of round. So I decided to put a bass drum head back on, cut it pretty good, got a huge size to it, and but that's why I was covered with that blanket that day. I think it looked really nasty, and I didn't want it to look that way, so I just threw the blanket over it. But it had a big, huge hole in the front, so it didn't really matter. And I was trying to stop the bleed. So anyhow, I hope that answers that question, Dougie. Great question. All right, got 2 more questions. All right. I'm going to take Tim Bragg's first. Tim, I told you about Tim Bragg. He actually said this to me. I think I even mentioned this one. Tim Bragg wrote, nice encore. This was the number 28 exercise from the Funk Drumming Workbook. He said, nice encore. How about adding fills to these, Earl, coming back into them? That would be cool. And then he says something about listening to Jeff Beck's Blow by Blow track. You know what I mean. Really funky, great first fill. Maybe he wants me to play that. I'm not sure. But I do like your idea of the fills. If I ever do those grooves again, I will definitely try to throw some fills in with the groove. That's a good idea. So thanks for that, Tim. And last but not least comes from my friend Greg Oneoff. And he writes this. I have a question for you. You can answer it here on Ask Earl Anything. When my grandson Ash is filming you play, can he hear your music, or does he have hearing protection on to cancel it out? Can people upstairs hear both your drums and the music? Have a wonderful week, and my hammering hombre. Thanks for the kind word, Greg, as always. I will tell you that Asher, when he films me, and this was on Angry Young Man, I believe. Yeah, I released a version of Angry Young Man with the moving camera only. Usually Asher does have headphones on, and usually he is listening to the music. As he said, usually. Every once in a while it's hearing protection, but I think that's his normal MO. He likes to hear the music. He likes to know what I'm doing. So usually he'll put headphones on, he'll be on a tethered, and he'll walk around himself without tripping over himself with the headphone cable. As far as upstairs, there is no upstairs. This is a garage off the house. So I am blessed to have a studio / office that is off the main house. Nobody really hears me, but my neighbors a little bit. And I've even got a large canal between me and the other side, and my next door neighbor behind me barely hears me, and the one in front of me barely hears me. I'm pretty blessed. I live at the end of a street. There's very little traffic at the end of my street, makes very little noise, and I don't bother anybody in the house. So I could play drums all day long and bother nobody. So that's the big blessing on my house. And that's why we bought this house, because when we walked in here and I noticed there was air conditioning in this garage, I said, somebody put an air conditioning duct in here? This is the place that's going to be the studio. So the only thing I did in the studio was I hired a guy to build the wall where we put the bookshelves. And we left the garage door so it closes, so it looks like a garage, very small garage on all three bays. And that's it. You know, it's got a little bit of a curved angled wall, so the set in the room sounds okay. But yeah, nobody bothers me, nobody hears me, and I don't bother them. So it's a blessing, great blessing I have here, Greg. But yeah, Asher listens to the headphones, listens to the music through the headphones when he records me. So thanks for asking. All right, that's it for Ask Earl Anything. It looks like it might have been a short one this week. You remember, your questions make the show. Without your questions, I don't have a show. I do appreciate you all watching me every week and every day, leaving comments and questions and whatever else. And don't hesitate to send in a request. I'll see what I can do for you. Love you all, and stay safe, stay healthy. We'll talk again in March. Bye for now. If you want to give me feedback, go ahead. Give me feedback. That's fine. I get crazy feedback sometimes. Like the last one, the craziest thing I got was, and I hope this makes the camera, was a guy wrote on one of my videos I did early on and said your floor tom's out of tune. And I just didn't hear it. I'm sorry. I didn't hear the floor tom being out of tune. But something he heard, maybe he's got perfect pitch. It's a possibility. Ah, that's the infamous sound of somebody commenting on something on YouTube. Have a great day. Talk to you soon. Bye.